A while back, I was on this road trip with my buddy, Alex. We were driving through the countryside, enjoying the scenic views and all. It was getting dark, and we needed to fill up our gas tank, so we spotted this gas station in the middle of nowhere. The place gave me the creeps right from the start. The lights were flickering, and the whole place seemed abandoned. But we didn't have much of a choice, so we pulled in. As soon as we stepped out of the car, a shiver ran down my spine. It was eerily quiet, like there was this heavy silence hanging in the air. The gas station attendant, if you could call him that, was this old man with a hunchback. He had this crooked grin that made my skin crawl. He stared at us with these unsettling eyes, like he was sizing us up or something. I asked him if he could fill up the tank, and he just nodded slowly, not saying a word. While Alex and I were waiting, I walked around a bit to stretch my legs. That's when I noticed something odd. There were these faded missing persons posters taped to the windows. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was just some local thing. As the old man filled up the tank, I heard whispers in the wind. I couldn't quite make out what they were saying, but it was like voices carried by the breeze. I looked around, but there was no one else there. Just Alex, the old man, and me. Once the tank was full, we went inside to pay. The inside of the gas station was even stranger. The shelves were lined with dusty, expired products, and the air smelled musty and stale. The old man's grin never left his face as he handed me the receipt, and I swear I saw something glinting in the shadows behind him. Feeling uneasy, I hurried back to the car. Alex must have felt it too because he was already waiting inside, his hands gripping the steering wheel. We took off without saying a word, but as we pulled away, I looked back and saw the old man still standing there, watching us with those unsettling eyes. We drove for hours, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. And that's when we heard it, a faint, distant sound that sent chills down our spines. It was the sound of whispering, just like the wind at the gas station. Only now, it was louder, almost like it was surrounding us. No matter how fast we drove, the whispering seemed to follow us. It got louder and more frantic, and soon we were both on edge, glancing at each other in fear. We didn't know what was happening or how to escape it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the whispering faded away. The relief was palpable, but the memory of that gas station still haunts me. I don't know what was really going on there, whether it was our imagination or something more sinister, but I do know one thing. I'll never forget the terror of that night. So, yeah, that's the story of the scariest gas station encounter I've ever had. It might sound crazy, but I swear every word of it is true. A while ago, I embarked on this road trip with my best friend, Sarah. We were cruising through this remote part of the country, relishing the breathtaking landscapes. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the terrain. With the fuel gauge inching toward empty, we knew it was time to find a gas station. Just when it felt like we were the only souls for miles, a distant gleam caught our eye. It was a gas station, seemingly plucked out of a horror movie. Its flickering lights and worn-out signs exuded an eerie vibe. Despite our misgivings, we had no choice but to pull in. After all, we couldn't risk getting stranded in the middle of nowhere. As the car rolled to a stop, a shudder ran down my spine. The atmosphere was dense with an uncanny stillness that hung in the air. We exchanged uneasy glances, our hearts pounding a little faster. The gas station attendant emerged from the shadows, a frail figure with an unsettling hunch. His face was etched with age, and his grin was so twisted it could give you nightmares. With a silent nod, he took the nozzle and began fueling the car. I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were piercing through my soul, analyzing every inch of me. I tried to strike up a conversation, but his voice barely rose above a whisper. It was like he was deliberately avoiding interaction. While waiting, I ventured a little ways from the car, desperate to break free from the palpable tension. My footsteps echoed in the eerie quiet, and that's when I noticed something chilling. The windows were plastered with faded missing persons posters. They were a jarring contrast to the mundane products displayed on the shelves. Uneasiness gnawed at me, but I brushed it aside as local peculiarities. It wasn't until later that I realized how wrong I was to ignore those signs. As the attendant completed the fueling, a strange sound carried on the wind. It was a distant, haunting whisper that slithered its way into my ears. I strained to catch the words, but they remained elusive. Panic surged within me as I scanned the surroundings, but there was no one except Sarah, the attendant, and me. With the tank finally filled, we retreated to the gloomy interior of the gas station to settle the bill. The inside was even more unsettling, a dimly lit chamber housing outdated products covered in layers of dust. The air was thick with an almost suffocating mustiness, and the attendant's unrelenting grin was as disturbing as ever. Uneasy chills raced down my spine, and I hurriedly paid, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere. As I exited, a glint in the shadows behind the attendant caught my eye, a glint that shouldn't have been there. The engine roared to life as we sped away from that gas station of horrors. The distance between us and that grim place grew, but an unsettling feeling lingered. Then, a distant, almost imperceptible whisper emerged again. It began as a faint murmur, gradually growing louder and more distinct. No matter how fast we drove, the whispering seemed to draw closer, encircling us like a sinister symphony. Fear settled between us like a heavy cloud, and our exchanged glances betrayed our shared terror. We were trapped in a nightmare, unable to fathom the source of this macabre cacophony. Hours stretched on as the whispering persisted, a relentless haunting that refused to release its grip. Just as we were on the brink of madness, the whispers subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence that was almost as unsettling. Eventually, we reached a bustling town, and the ghostly echoes of that gas station faded into the past. But the memory lingered, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left unsolved. You won't believe the spine-chilling encounter I had at a gas station a while back. Picture this, a moonless night, a deserted highway, and my friend Mike and I in a beat-up old car. We were on a road trip that had already been packed with adventure, but little did we know the most terrifying part was yet to come. Our fuel gauge was dangerously low, and anxiety crept in as we wondered if we'd find a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Just when despair was about to take over, a dim light flickered in the distance. We sighed in relief as we approached what seemed like a lifeline, a gas station that appeared to stand in defiance against the desolate landscape. The place had an eerie aura, almost like it had seen its fair share of horror stories. The gas station's neon sign buzzed intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. Mike and I exchanged uneasy glances, but the need for fuel outweighed our trepidation. As we pulled up to the pump, a shiver ran down my spine. An old man emerged from the shadows, his back hunched, and his eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness. His grin was twisted, almost like he knew something we didn't. He barely spoke, merely gesturing for us to hand him the money. While he filled the tank, I explored the surroundings, hoping to ease my growing discomfort. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. Missing persons posters, faded and peeling, plastered on the walls of the gas station's minimart. Dread settled in my gut, and I realized we might be in a situation far more sinister than we had imagined. The old man finished pumping gas and handed me the receipt with a nod. I hastened back to the car, my heart pounding. Mike's grip on the steering wheel spoke volumes of his unease as well. With an unsettling feeling, we drove away, but I couldn't help but glance back at the gas station. The old man still standing there, a macabre silhouette against the night. As we drove on, a peculiar sound reached our ears. Faint whispers, like ghostly echoes carried by the wind. Mike and I exchanged baffled glances, wondering if we were imagining things. But the whispers grew louder, words emerging from the hushed tones. They were indecipherable yet haunting, and a growing sense of dread took root within us. No matter how fast we drove, the whispers persisted, weaving an eerie tapestry around us. Panic gripped us, and our attempts to drown out the whispers with music proved futile. We were trapped in a surreal nightmare, and the more we tried to escape, the tighter its grip became. Hours stretched on, the whispers growing louder and more frenzied. It felt like a descent into madness, and I could see fear mirrored in Mike's eyes. Just when we thought we couldn't bear it any longer, the whispers gradually faded, leaving behind an eerie silence that was almost as unsettling. We reached a bustling town, the normalcy of its lights and sounds a stark contrast to the horrors we had endured. The memory of that gas station still sends shivers down my spine, a chilling reminder that sometimes the unknown can be far more terrifying than we could ever imagine. Not too long ago, my friend Lisa and I were on a cross-country road trip, seeking adventure on the open road. Little did we know the most bone-chilling experience of our lives was waiting for us at a desolate gas station in the middle of nowhere. We had been driving for hours, the sun setting in a blaze of fiery hues. The gas gauge was flirting dangerously with empty, and anxiety bubbled in our chests. Just as panic was about to set in, we spotted a dim light piercing through the darkness. The gas station emerged on the horizon like a beacon of hope, though something about it seemed off. As we pulled up, a cold breeze seemed to sweep through the air, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. The gas station was eerie, the flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows that danced around like malevolent spirits. The silence was heavy, almost like the world was holding its breath. Lisa and I exchanged wary glances, but the low fuel tank left us with no choice. A gnarled figure emerged from the darkness, the gas station attendant. His back was bent like a question mark, and his grin was more like a grotesque snarl. His eyes gleamed with a sinister knowledge that sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't speak much, just took the money and began pumping gas. As I stood there, an uneasiness settled over me, and my gaze wandered to the windows. That's when I noticed the faded posters. Missing persons, their eyes staring out from the paper as if pleading for help. My heart raced, and I wanted to run, but we couldn't risk running out of gas in the middle of nowhere. The attendant finished and handed me the receipt, his twisted grin never faltering. I practically sprinted back to the car, my heart pounding. Lisa's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. She felt it too. We pulled away, leaving behind the creepy gas station and the unsettling figure. But the night wasn't done with us yet. As we drove on, a whispering sound gradually filled the car. It was like voices carried on the wind, whispering things I couldn't quite understand. Lisa's knuckles turned white as she clutched the wheel, her eyes wide with terror. The whispers grew louder, their urgency sending shivers down my spine. No matter how fast we went, the whispers clung to us like a malevolent force. It was like they were crawling under our skin, burrowing into our minds. Panic set in, and I couldn't help but glance at Lisa, her face pale and contorted with fear. Hours passed in a nightmarish blur, the whispers becoming deafening in their intensity. It felt like we were trapped in a nightmarish loop, and there was no escape. Just when we thought we couldn't take it any longer, the whispers slowly faded, leaving behind an oppressive silence that was just as terrifying. We finally reached a populated area, the sounds of civilization a balm to our frayed nerves. But the memory of that gas station and the sinister whispers still haunts us. A reminder that sometimes the darkness that lurks in the corners of our world can be far more terrifying than we dare to imagine. I recently had an intriguing encounter at a gas station. It's the kind of story that could happen to anyone, and that's what makes it all the more terrifying. So, brace yourself for a tale that will make you question the safety of even the most ordinary places. I was driving alone on a stretch of highway that seemed to go on forever. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The gas gauge was flirting with empty, and the realization that I might be stranded in the middle of nowhere sent a shiver down my spine. Just when desperation was about to kick in, a distant glow appeared on the horizon, a gas station, like an oasis in the desert. I pulled into the station, and immediately a sense of unease settled over me. The place seemed eerily quiet, the buzzing of the fluorescent lights the only sound breaking the silence. The pump handle felt cold in my hand as I filled up the tank, the flickering lights above casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. A middle-aged man emerged from the shadows, his face expressionless, almost robotic. He took the money without a word, his eyes devoid of any emotion. It was as if he was going through the motions, disconnected from the reality around him. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but I brushed it off as my imagination running wild. As he filled the tank, I walked around the station, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. That's when I noticed something unsettling. Missing persons posters, faded and curling at the edges, plastered on the windows of the Minimart. The faces stared out at me, haunting and desperate, a stark reminder that danger could be lurking in the most unexpected places. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. The man finished fueling the car and handed me the receipt, his blank expression unchanging. I practically ran back to my car, my heart pounding. I drove away, the gas station fading in the rearview mirror, but the feeling of unease stayed with me like a shadow. As I continued down the highway, the sound of whispering filled the car, faint at first, like a breeze rustling through leaves. I adjusted the radio, thinking it was just interference, but the whispering persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Panic welled up within me as I realized the whispers were words, sentences in a language I couldn't understand. No matter how fast I drove, the whispers stayed with me, a relentless presence that seemed to seep into my very being. I couldn't escape them, and the more I tried, the more they seemed to envelop me. My heart raced, and I felt a growing sense of dread that I couldn't shake. Hours passed in a blur, the whispers becoming more frenzied and urgent. It felt like they were inside my head, echoing through my thoughts, making it hard to think straight. Just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, the whispers abruptly stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence that was just as unsettling. I finally reached a town, the comforting glow of streetlights and the sounds of civilization providing a stark contrast to the horrors I had experienced. The memory of that gas station still sends shivers down my spine, a reminder that danger can lurk in even the most mundane places, waiting to ensnare unsuspecting souls in its web of terror.